busy lifestyle, it's easy to become stressed and tired, but the right multivitamin can help you stay performing at your best. Try the DS range. Designed to help support your active lifestyle, DS Sport has the right combination of vitamins and minerals to give you the extra energy you need to perform at your best. Plus, it's available in sachets for on-the-go convenience. For the energy you need to tackle your busy lifestyle, try the new look DS range. This has been Medifax for DS24.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another WiSH webinar. This evening, we're going to be talking about a very topical debate about running shoe technology and particularly the use of the carbon plates. So we look forward to the discussion that we're going to have amongst our panel, our presenter, and our host. My name is Robin Saggers, and I am part of WiSH. And at WiSH, we like to get other people involved to present their knowledge and to grow the community. And by doing this, we couldn't do it without the help from Asino Lita Pharmaceuticals. And you'll see today that the intro slide has got some slightly different products. This is their DS range of supplements. So please do go and take a look at their Instagram and Facebook profiles for more information. This evening will be hosted by Lauren Brown. Lauren is one of the active members of the WiSH Running Interest Group. She runs it with Belinda Waghorn, and so we welcome her. And I'll just give you a little bit about her before I hand over to her, who will introduce our speaker today. So Lauren attained her B.Tech in Podiatry at the University of Johannesburg in 2011. After that, she completed a holistic wound care management course in 2012. And then she went on to open private practices, and she quickly extended to 4 private practices in the Gauteng region. She currently practices in Midrand at Waterfall Hospital in collaboration with Prof. John at the Waterfall Sports and Orthopedic Surgery. She's also the Gauteng chair for the Podiatry Association of South Africa. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lauren, who will take it further. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robin. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is a fantastic, exciting, controversial topic that I think Sean, our speaker, has really enjoyed researching. That's what he's told me. So tonight's topic is the energy efficiency differences between carbon-plated and non-carbon-plated running shoes. Just to introduce Sean, sorry. John's actually missing this evening, and that's why I think I have him on my mind. Sean says to me that he is a lunatic that I can trust with regards to this topic. He's fascinated with footwear and tech, but Sean obtained his National Higher Diploma in Podiatry from the Technikon of Witwatersrand in 1990 and a BSc Honours in Podiatric Studies from the University of Brighton in 1999. He opened his first private practice in 1991 and has spent the first 19 years of his career in Johannesburg. In 2009, he relocated to the Cape and started his sports performance and rehab center in Greenpoint. He also has a second practice in Century City. Both practices are general podiatric practices where any podiatry condition is treated. His main field of interest, though, that he's very passionate about is podiatric biomechanics and sports biomechanics, leg length discrepancies, and orthotic designs. Sean also heads up our masterclasses for digital orthotic design, and he's a very passionate, active member in our Podiatry Association and beloved by many of us.
Sure.
Go for it, Sean.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. So first things, if you see me looking from side to side, it's because I've got 2 screens. I'm like trying to upskill my tech ability here. So if I'm looking around and I'm not possibly concentrating, just that's what it is. So the first thing before I get going is a quick, first up, I'm going to declare no financial, I need glasses, I'm over 40. No financial interest in preparing this talk, and at no point am I recommending or endorsing any product. Okay, although you're going to see quite a few products, I'm not endorsing or recommending any. I would like to extend thanks to the following people for their assistance. Chloe from Adidas, Mia from Saucony, John from Essex, David from Mizuno, Vibeke from Tifosi, Albertus from Nike, Simon Bartol, the legend, Dennis Reebok, the other legend, Kevin Kirby, Craig Payne, Annette Thompson for their assistance with literature and guidance. And then the athletes that I spoke with, and you'll hear more about them as we get going a bit later, Anna, Adrian, Malcolm, David, and Marius, and then Jono and Grant from Run, and Craig from Sweatshop. And then thanks you to Robin and Lauren from WiSH for inviting me to do this talk, and the sponsors, Asina Elita. What I said to Robin, to Lauren yesterday was, thanks so much for giving me a master's project and giving me 6 weeks to present it, because this topic is massive. It's huge. So I'm going to just share my screen, and hopefully we get everything going. And if there's any tech issues, my son's going to run downstairs and help Dad with the tech. So we are sharing. Which screen have you got?
We've got your desktop.
Okay, so let me just. So I just got to find the right. Alt F5. Which one have you got now?
Still your desktop.
Slideshow from beginning. And now which one have you got? Have
Yes.
you got this?
That's
Okay.
your title screen. Go for it.
The title screen. Okay, so the title, energy efficiency differences between carbon plated shoes and non-carbon plated running shoes. It's massive. And what you're going to hear, not so much is about the differences, but it's about the enhancement that the carbon fiber plated shoes are making. So that will automatically tell you that there is a difference. So first thing, do they make a difference? Well, the first thing I'm going to say is the following. If you've ever heard the phrase, and we should hear it, and we should hear it this year, Citius, Altius, Fortius, which is the motto of the modern Olympic Games, and it was introduced by Baron Pierre de Coubertin, who borrowed the phrase from his friend Henry Didon, Father Henry Didon. And over the years, we've seen, amazing feats in sports where athletes have indeed gone faster, higher, and stronger. And a lot of it is due to more scientific training, more focused training, more new training techniques. Some have come about from changes in technique, and I want you to think change in technique, what could have changed? Well, the Fosbury flop in high jump replaced the scissor technique, and automatically people started going higher. Then there's newer equipment that's come about, and as there's new equipment, it will change something in the sport. And I want you to think of quite a few, so I'm just going to quickly go through a few sports. In rowing, they changed the blade, the shape of the blade in rowing, and the boats went a bit faster. The rule is obviously all boats have to have the same blade shape now. Field hockey, where the sticks that are developed now, where before they were wood and carbon fiber, they're now completely composite, new composite materials of Kevlar and carbon fiber. They're much lighter, they hit the ball harder and faster. Swimming, there was the sharkskin suit that was banned because it broke the records too much. Possibly that might come up as a discussion point a bit later. Pole vault, they changed the materials of the pole vault. Javelin, there was new javelin designs. In shooting, if ever you've watched Olympic shooting, you'll watch the fact that they wear jackets full of Velcro and straps, and they actually strap the rifle onto themselves. And that surely has to give you an advantage. But again, everyone's got the same thing, so it's fine. Cycling, and I put in brackets chemistry aside, changes to bike geometry, different gear ratios, all assist in making the fast go sporter, so the sport go faster. In stronger, I was trying to think of a technology that would have changed, but weightlifting is weightlifting. I don't think there's anything that's come about that's changed the stronger part, but certainly higher and faster we've gotten. In running, we look at the introduction of spikes, which went as far back as 1850, they put spikes onto athletic shoes, and that improved sprint times. Abebe Bikila, when he won the 1960 Olympic marathon barefoot, he returned 4 years later, again in Tokyo, believe it or not, and he ran a faster time when he was shod. So one would love to see what would he do if he had these shoes with him now. Then distance running shoes have contributed to the growth of marathon running and road running worldwide. And the way I look at that is, how did it work? Is we looked at, if you look at the Comrades Marathon in the early 70s, there was maybe 3,000 or 4,000 runners. And as shoes have gotten better, you're now having 25,000 runners taking part in Comrades and Two Oceans and the bigger runs. I'm sure you all remember Comrades Marathon. It's something that happened a couple of years ago. But what's happened now is athletes have moved into technologically advanced shoes. They've moved into newer shoes that are technologically advanced. And there are a number of changes, which we'll discuss a bit later. And the proof is in the running. And what we've seen in the last 3 years is almost every single record has changed in the last 3 years. They've been broken and broken again. And records that have stood for a long time have been broken. And we say, what is the thing that's changed it? Is it the athlete? Is it the runner? What is it? And believe it or not, it's probably the shoes. It's a technological advantage that, as through the discussion, I'll show you how they're actually working, that has changed. And if we look at the different record list, leading it is the Nike Vaporfly by a long way, or the Nikes by a long way. And I'm not endorsing them. There's the Hoka Carbon X2 has got, I think, the 50 kilometer and the 100 kilometer record, although I think the 50K record has been broken recently. The Adidas Adios. So we can ask, do the shoes supply that much of an advantage? Well, just think, Bridget Kosgei, who now holds the women's marathon record, she had a PB of 2:18 and 20, put on a pair of Vaporflies, and she ran a 2:14 something. And she took 80 seconds of Paula Radcliffe's marathon record that had stood for 80 years, so it stood for 16 years. So you've got to say to yourself, did the shoe give her that? If she wasn't wearing the shoe, they'd probably be investigating her completely for some form of doping. But all she did was change her footwear. So this week we just saw Sha'Carri Richardson, and she's going to be phenomenal to watch in the Olympics. Ran a 285, but she's got a PB of 270, and I think she's running in Nike spikes. They've got a new spike out. I haven't seen the design, but I'm quite sure that it's a very, very technologically, it's not just spikes. So I want to, before we go any further, I'm going to work on an assumption when you say that, does the shoe provide you a difference? And I'm going to give you a little assumptive hypothetical discussion that went on in my head between 2 and 4 in the morning. Most of my creative stuff happens when I'm trying to sleep. So there was an observation noted in an article by Munis Pardis in 2020 where they discuss an observation of a semi-elite runner who ran 6 times, 3 times in a normal racing flat and 3 times in a carbon fiber plated shoe. She has a cadence of 195. When she put on the carbon fiber plated shoe, her stride length went from 2 meters to 2 meters 0.205 to 200. So she got a 5 centimeter gain in stride length per step, just by changing shoes, going from a normal shoe to a plated shoe. So if you take this cadence and you say athlete, and what we're going to do is we're going to take this athlete and we're going to clone him. So there's no differences between the two. Just remember, this is hypothetical. Lauren, you got that? It's all hypothetical. Okay. Athlete 1 runs with a cadence of 195 and a stride length of 200 centimeters. And she would run 390 steps per kilometer and take 21,100 steps for a standard marathon. We now have her clone running in a carbon fiber plated shoe, same cadence of 195, with a stride length now of 205, would run 399.7 steps per kilometer, take 20,585 steps, and will finish 1,170 meters ahead of the cloned athlete. And all athlete 2 did was change footwear. Athlete 1 would still have 515 steps to get to the finish line. And that is, in any other way of looking at it, you would be saying that is doping, but it's not. It's just a shoe change. Now, I want you to bury this example in your head for a bit later, because I've got a thing that rambled again through my brain, but we're going to get there. So the introduction of the technology has created discomfort. There's no question about that. And it's raised the bar. Athletics is not going to be like we knew it. What was happening in 2016 and 2017 is not going to be where we are going forward. So there's no doubt that the new shoes have raised the bar and changed the landscape of athletics. And almost every single distance record from 5,000 to 100 kilometers is being broken by athletes wearing these shoes. And keeping that list of records up to date is actually impossible. I remember Ross Tucker putting up a tweet the other day when I think it was the 10,000 meter record got broken twice in a week. He said it's impossible to keep up to date with a record list because it's changing so rapidly. And the truth is, these shoes, we all think that it was Nike first to the party, but the reality is it's not new. This increased longitudinal bending stiffness has been looked at for a long time. And Stefansson and Nig in 2000 showed that by increasing longitudinal bending stiffness of a shoe would increase vertical jump height by an average of 1.7 centimeters. So changing the footwear is something that they've actually been looking at for around 40 years. It was just Nike who happened to get first to market with a really great shoe, and the rest of the shoe companies are now playing catch up with some really good products, I'll add. So in the introduction, you thought I was it's only the introduction now. Keep up. So we're going to look, what I'm going to do through this talk is I'm going to look at the literature, and I'm going to say, let's try and understand how the shoes influence running economy. We're going to look at the technology, and I'm going to try to show you, I've got a few examples of shoes. What exactly is this new technology? I'm going to speak to some of the athletes that I work with, and these are real experiences from athletes running in the shoes. And when I say athletes, some are very high-level triathletes, some are weekend legends and lunchtime legends, or weekend warriors. I'm going to say, what do the shoe people say? So when somebody goes into a running store and says, I want to buy carbon fiber plated shoes, how do they advise the athletes? And what was my experience? This plotter went for a few runs. So we're going to move on. The first thing is, when you look at the literature, as with anything, there's a confusing spread of opinions. Okay. The only area in medicine that I know of where there's no more argument about anything is smoking. There's no argument smoking is bad for you. We don't research it anymore. We've finished with that subject. But everything else is still open to debate. So the shoes make a difference of up to 4%, which is Hochheim et al. And Seinfeld in 2021, amongst many others. Okay. And the shoes make no difference. Beck et al. It's not the runner, it's the shoe. Some people say it's speed dependent and only works better in faster runners. In other words, you've heard people say you have to run a specific speed to get the benefit out of the shoe. And there are specific speeds where the performance is optimal. Some of the research, they looked at the runners across various speeds and they worked out what was the optimum speed for that stiffness of shoe. There's a reduction of metabolic cost and it requires optimal bending stiffness. I'm going to get more to that. And some people even said that the shoes will benefit only the slower runners. A lot of the research says the shoes actually benefit women more than men. So there's a very big confusing spread of opinion. And the more you read, obviously, the less you know, which is normal, quite normal in any field of science that we do. So many of the articles discuss this thing called optimal stiffness, meaning that a shoe can be too flexible or too hard. And there's a sweet spot between that flexibility range that will function the athlete specifically. So where the IAAF rules state that the shoe has to be a commercially available shoe, I can guarantee you, this is my personal opinion, that when the athletes are lining up, the top level athletes are lining up, those plates are tweaked to their specific shoes. The shoes may look like the commercially available option, but those shoes are tweaked. And in terms of the stiffness of the shoe, it's actually, I was having a discussion with Malcolm Friedman, believe it or not, one of my athletes. Malcolm Friedman's an orthotist in Cape Town, where he explained to me that when they make a prosthesis and they have to order in the components for the foot of a prosthesis for a person with a balloon or an amputation, there's different strengths of plates which have to be matched to different weights of people. And that's obviously going to be something that comes into how the plates are functioning, especially if the plates are less rigid. So we're going to move on and we're going to ask the question, what is running economy? Well, there's many definitions that go far back into literature. I just took these two. The first one from Kip, Cram, and Hochheim saying the rate of oxygen uptake, which is the amount of oxygen in milliliters of oxygen per kilograms per minute for running at a specified sub-maximal velocity. Similarly, Daniels a bit earlier on said the relationship between the velocity of running and the metabolic energy cost at a given sub-maximal speed. So that's how they test it. They don't put you at your max, they put you slightly less. This is not my area of expertise. The sports physiologists know much more about this than I do. But it stands to reason that if you reduce the amount of work in a muscle group, there will be a resultant need for less oxygen. So reduced work equals less oxygen equals increased economy, which will give you greater speed or increased endurance for the same amount of work. So if we can alter running economy, we can change what the athlete's going to produce. And what are the factors that are known to influence running economy? Again, we go to Kip, Cram, and Hochkamer, and Pew, and there's a few other guys, but the main ones is the weight of the shoe. If you can make the shoe lighter, you will influence running economy. Kip, Cram, and Hochkamer proved this by where they increased the weight of a shoe by 100 grams, and it impacted running economy by about 1.1%. Air resistance. The faster you go, the more resistance there is on your body. So if you find guys drafting in a race, it's because they're trying to get the benefit of not having to go through the air resistance themselves. They're not going to put in the hard work. We know that this is done in cycling all the time. When you look at the Breaking 2 project, Eliud Kipchoge ran with a diamond-shaped group of runners ahead of him to break that air resistance. Stride length. If you can change your stride length, we're going to get better. You're going to get further per stride. I've already shown you my hypothetical clone athlete. If you can increase your propulsion at toe-off, and if you can increase your propulsion, you're going to get further into your stride length. If you've got greater plyometric strength will again work into stride length and propulsion. If you have greater endurance and you fatigue later than the other runner, you're going to go further and faster than the other runner with better economy. Your running form. If your running form is poor, you're going to use muscles incorrectly, and you're going to then find that you're going to fatigue quicker. The course profile. If you've got a flat course or a hilly course or a downhill course, those are all factors that are known to influence the running economy. So it's multifactorial, and we know and appreciate that not everyone is equal in shape and size. And I always use athletics and rugby as examples to explain to people that not everyone is going to do the same sport. If you look at rugby, you've got props, you've got a hooker, you've got flanks, you've got locks, you've got your backs. Everyone is slightly different shapes and sizes. They're different, you've got different body morphology, and they're able to do different things. Similarly, in athletics, you've got your long distance, your middle distance, your sprinters, your track and your field athletes. You know, your high jumper looks very different to your shot putter. So if you can influence the factors per athlete, you can change the economy of what that athlete is doing. So what is the influence of carbon fiber plated shoes and running economy? And I'm not going to read out the references, but it's a very busy slide, and just hang on a sec. Okay, the shoes increase stride length. They delay the contact time. So again, if you delay the contact time, what you're actually doing there is you're decreasing your peak braking force. Remember, when you run and your foot lands on the floor, it has to stop. And if you can decrease that peak braking force, you're going to allow the muscles to work less. They reduce the work at the first metatarsophalangeal joint, the arch, the ankle, and the knee. This is shown in a lot of the studies that there's a reduction specifically at the first MTPJ. And by reducing the work in the foot, you're improving economy. Remember, it's using less oxygen. If you use less oxygen, you have an improvement in running economy. It increases segmental stiffness in the foot, knee, and the hip. There was a study just out recently, it will come up a bit later, where Jeff Burns, I think is his name. It was a very recent study where he looked at middle distance runners, and he looked at good runners versus elite runners. And in the good runners, he saw that the elite runners have an increased stiffness through their body. So they're able to load the spring more. Remember that the body, when it runs, we look at it as a spring mass system. They're able to load the spring more and get more out of it. So the shoes help increase that segmental stiffness in the foot, knee, and the hip. It decreases the muscle shortening velocity of the calf. So the speed at which the calf contracts is decreased. What that does is it allows you to use less oxygen in that work. It alters the direction of toe off, and when I've got some shoes in my hand, I'll show you exactly what we mean by that. The plate position can influence the lever arm at toe off, and what they did, Ortega did a study where they looked at the shoe and they put 3 plates, one near the foot, one in the middle of the midsole, and one between the midsole and the outer sole. If you don't know where those areas are, we'll do anatomy of the shoe just now. And what they found is that the shape of the plate, albeit that the plate was exactly the same shape through the different positions, the actual lever arm of the shoe was altered. So you can position the plate in the shoe to alter the lever arm to give you greater force on toe off. It increased limb length. So the increased stack height, and remember, some of these shoes are capped at 40 millimeters. 40 millimeters is quite a big shoe. That 4 centimeter increase in limb length can improve economy. Nicholas Muniz Pardis et al. Did that study. The rocker bottom of the shoe, the shape of the rocker, shifts the center of mass anterior to the first metatarsophalangeal joint. So there's a significant change in what these shoes are doing to the foot and the lower limb in running. So we look at them and say, are these shoes a panacea? And I've been told I pronounce it incorrectly by my children, but it's a panacea. And basically, this is the dream of every shoe marketing department around the world. We put in a carbon fiber plated shoe, therefore you will run faster. A question, and this is a discussion I had with Simon Bartold, are the carbon fiber plates springs or levers? And in order to determine that, I went back to old-fashioned physics and said, Hooke's law, the restoring force is generally proportional to the amount of stretch experienced. What that means is if an object or a material is bent or deformed and it returns back to its original shape, it's a spring. So if a plate bends and returns back to its original shape, that plate is a spring. If the plate doesn't bend and it's rigid and it uses the classical effects of a beam and it redirects force through a fulcrum, then it's a lever. So there are shoes, and I've got quite a few examples. I've got 8 shoes that I'm going to hold up just now and show you. Some are levers and some are springs, and it depends on the shoe. So, you know, what is the shoe? How is the shoe constructed? What is the anatomy of the shoe? I said I promised I'd show you that. So I'm going to hold this one up. You can see this. So the first thing we talk about is the stack height. So the stack height is the thickness here of the actual midsole. How thick is that midsole? One thing I haven't put up there is the heel drop. The heel drop is the difference between the thickness of the heel and the thickness of the forefoot. Most shoes are between 4 and 8 millimeters in terms of heel drop. So that is the stack height. The midsole materials, well, the midsole materials in this particular genre of shoe have all changed, and they've gone to materials, it's called a TPU, which is a thermoplastic, or they've gone to something called PBAX, which is a polyamide something. It's a very long name, and I'm only a podiatrist, you must forgive me. So they've gone to material called PBAX, but what these shoes are is they are extremely springy. So if I hold this shoe up to the side like that, and I do this, you can see there in the thing how spongy this is. So if you take a Nike Vaporfly and you throw it on the floor and you try to land it on the point, that shoe bounces like a rubber ball. It bounces straight back towards you. So these shoes have got materials that are extremely soft, extremely compliant, extremely resilient, and they bounce straight back. So the midsole can certainly be considered to be a spring. We talk of the geometry of the midsole, and what we're talking about is the shape of the shoe here. So the geometry of the midsole. The spring inside, is it a spring or a lever? So this shoe, which is the Adidas Adios Pro, if I try to bend it, I actually cannot bend this shoe. I'm not as weak as you think. I cannot bend this shoe, it's rigid. I then take this one, which is the on, and the shoe bends, and you can see it springs back. So is it a spring or a lever? It depends on how the shoe is being constructed by the manufacturer. The position of the plate, well, most of the shoes have a plate embedded more or less in the middle over here. Some shoes, the plate is between the foot and the midsole. Some it's in the middle of the midsole, and in some shoes, I don't know any, in fact there are a couple, where the plate is between the outer sole and the midsole. So it depends on what the shoe is constructed and how they've gone about it. But those are the positions of the plates. And if it's in the middle of the, somewhere in the midsole, it can be anywhere in between. The uppers, if you look at them now, they are quite rigid. They're very light. They're usually welded mesh or welded mesh, but they're quite rigid. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that to you now. Then the outer sole. If you look at the outer sole of the shoe, a lot of the shoes have very little, if any, outer sole. Where is, I'm just going to find another shoe. I've got one here. You can see here, there's almost no outer sole. There's almost nothing. So the outer soles are very often taken away. The Nike Vaporfly, there's almost nothing at the back in the racing shoe. And the reason is they want to make the shoes lighter. So how do you make a shoe lighter? You go to lighter materials or you lose parts of it. So that's how they've made the shoe lighter. But remember that the IAAF rules state there's only allowed to be one plate. There's a maximum stack height of 40 millimeters. This shoe, I think it is the Adidas, it comes in at 39.5 millimeters. So it's just making the legal limit of the shoe. So there's a maximum stack height allowed. It's 20 millimeters in a track shoe, 40 millimeters in a road shoe. And the shoe has to be commercially available for 3 months before a major event. So those are the basic rules, and most of the guys are following that. What are the commonalities we find in this particular genre of shoe? Well, the first one is the stack heights are extremely thick in most of the shoes. There's a few where the stack heights are thinner, but in general, you're looking at very thick stack heights made up of these compliant energy returning materials. So think Nike Boost. Nike Boost was also one of the first to the market with energy return materials. And I always argued, I said, in order to get energy out of something, you have to put it in first. But what happens is these machines, they decrease vibration. So what happens is that allows you to conserve your energy for longer. They've all got the embedded carbon plates, which, like I said, are top placed, mid placed, bottom placed, or removable. I've got a shoe with a removable plate now, and I'll show that to you. It is this one here. This is a shoe I was lent. I haven't seen this shoe. It is called a One Mix. I've never seen this shoe. I've never seen this brand, but there's your plate, and you can see that the shape of the plate. Now, is it a spring or is it a lever? It is a spring. Okay, and if you feel the shoe, if you feel this shoe without the plate, it's quite flexible and quite bendy. As soon as you put the plate in and stand on it, the whole shoe becomes more rigid and less compliant, which is what you're wanting to create. So the plate adds structural integrity to the compliance of the midsole. So one of the shoes that I put, I'm not going to tell you which one. I haven't got the best foot mechanics. I put the shoe on, and it's almost impossible to walk in that shoe. You have to run. It's like riding a bicycle slowly. If you ride it too slowly, you're going to fall over. So the shoes, the materials are so soft and compliant that unless you're moving quickly, you're going to actually find that the shoe doesn't support your foot well. But as soon as you're going and running, the combination of the material, the compliant material, collapsing and absorbing impact, feeding into the plate, which then propels you forward, you will feel the benefit of how these shoes actually work. And that benefit is what's creating all of those things I said earlier about increasing stride length and amongst others, and changing the way your foot functions. They all have a rocker bottom sole geometry. So what do we mean by that? If I try and get the shoe exactly flat in front of the camera, this curve here is a rocker bottom sole. So rocker bottoms are something that podiatrists and orthotists have used for years to offload wounds and painful parts of the foot. If you put this shoe down on the floor, it rolls like a wheel. So the rocker bottom sole geometries emphasize at the forefoot to create what I call a meta rocker. So the shoes all have that shape. If I put them all up like that, you can see that there's this absolute increased curve. A lot of your traditional shoes, your traditional running shoes, you're also seeing that shape coming into traditional running shoes, because we now know that that works, and I'm going to explain that to you a little bit later. Like I said, the uppers are all very, very lightweight, and they're relatively inflexible in a lot of the shoes, and limited thin outer soles, which, like I said, is there to reduce weight. An important thing, and this is, I had a discussion with a couple of the shoe tech guys who sell the shoes, and also an orthotist, is the position of the first metatarsophalangeal joint relative to the curve of the rocker. To me, this is something that's vital, because if your first metatarsophalangeal sits too anterior or too proximal to the actual curvature of the rocker, what you're going to find is that that shoe will not enhance your ability to run as well as the shoe is designed. So that then becomes an important criteria where we as people in sports medicine have to look at. When someone comes and says, I ran in carbon fiber plated shoes and they were this and they were this and they did this, is firstly look at what is the shape of that rocker relative to their foot. because you might find that if they got another shoe with a slightly different shaped rocker, they'd be absolutely fine. So it then can come down to go and try on a few different brands and see where it's going. The shoe tech guy, the shoe sales guys that I work with, I asked them the question and they said, that is something that realistically is only going to be looked at in your top level stores where the guys are really, really clever. So when I say clever, they know a lot more about selling shoes. So remember that the shoe reduces work primarily. Look at a lot of the research, it's primarily at the first metatarsophalangeal joint. So if there isn't this harmonious relationship between the foot and the first MTPJ, it will cause the foot to function incorrectly. And the shoes, remember, they're making a difference of 1 to 4%. So a subtle change will mean a subtle change in what you're getting out of the shoe. And we ask ourselves a question: what are the components that are most effective in the improvement of the efficiency? And I ask the question, I'm going to ask in terms of a question, and feel free to come back with questions. Is it the vibration dampening of the midsole? Now remember that vibration dampening goes to work that was again done by Ben O'Neill quite a long time ago, where he looked at neuromuscular control of the body, and it was proven by Salomon, where Simon Bartol designed the shoes that have got what's called vibe technology, where he showed that if there's resonance of frequency, that resonance of frequency can cause injury at different parts of the body. So if you can dampen vibration and reduce resonance of input frequencies to the body, you're going to cause less fatigue. So is it the vibration dampening of the midsole? I think it's got a significant part to do with it. Is it the energy return from the midsole? Is it the fact that if you watch a slow motion picture or slow motion video of guys running in Vaporflies, that 40mm stack height collapses down to almost nothing and then bounces back like a rubber ball. So is it the energy return from the midsole? Is it the spring or the lever effect of the plate? Is it the forefoot rocker? Is it the overall shape of the midsole? If you look at this shoe here, this is a trail version. You can actually see that the shoe is almost like a boat. If you've looked at Hoka's, where's a Hoka? Here's a Hoka. If you look at Hoka's, Hoka's have always had this almost complete rounded bottom. You can see the profile. So the whole shoe is rounded. So is it the overall shape of the midsole? Is it the marked reduction in weight of the shoes overall? And these shoes weigh, most of them are on 200 grams, some even slightly less. Or is it the sum of all parts? So again, this opinion varies, but in my opinion, there's not one single factor that's the magic bullet in what is it that makes these shoes create the improvement in running economy that we see. All of the features together create a combination that delivers the improvement, and the overall function of the shoe shape and materials create a better environment to enable. Now, this is, for me, this is an important part. The planted foot creates a better environment to enable swing limb. Remember, it is your swinging limb that actually is creating the power to pull your center of mass forward when you're running or walking. And if you think, how do you initiate gait? Do you initiate gait by plantar flexing your foot, or do you initiate gait by swinging your leg forward? And when you swing your leg forward, the planted foot has to allow that to happen. If you look at the work done by Kevin Kirby, or also by Howard Dannenberg rather, on sagittal plane mechanics, he talks about the planted foot has to allow the swinging limb to move. And these shoes allow the swinging limb to move more efficiently. Must you be a forefoot striker? I'm not going to translate what I've put in brackets. I think you can all work it out. But I want you to look at the picture that will be coming up on the left. You can see Bridget Kosgei running. Bridget Kosgei is an out-and-out heel striker. You look at the other picture, which is taken from the Ineos, from the breaking two, from the Ineos where he went below the 2 hour mark. Kipchoge looks like he's about to heel strike, if you ask me. And the other 2 runners behind him are also heel striking. So do you have to be a forefoot striker? No, you do not. Okay, it's not something. And in fact, in the one article done by Hochkamer, when he looked at the biomechanics of competitive male runners in 3 running shoes, he specifically asked for 10 heel strikers so he could look at it. They specifically asked in his research. He didn't want somebody who was a forefoot striker. He went to somebody who's habitually heel strikes. So if we look at the shoes, so what I'm going to do, I don't have an example of the Nike. There's a picture coming up, but we've all seen the Nike Vaporfly. You all know what it looks like. It's a thick stack. It's got the 2 AirPods in the forefoot. So I'm just going to go forward to the shoe. Hold on, I'm just going to go forward, then I'll come backwards. I'm just going to get my laser pointer. You can see there you've got your AirPods. You can see the curved rocker. The plate sits roughly in the middle here. You've got this woven upper, but it's not that flexible. It's relatively inflexible. So you can see that that's what the Nike's got. Below it, you've got the New Balance fuel cell. And you can see again, the thick stack, the plate lives somewhere. I think the plate actually almost, I don't know if it follows this contour. Forgive me, Nike, if I've got it, New Balance, if I've got it wrong. There you've got all of the ASICS shoes. And again, you can see that commonality in the shape and design between thick stacks, rockers, plates embedded somewhere in between. I'm just going to go back. The ASICS shoe, I've just discussed the ASICS. I've got the Saucony over here. This is the Saucony Endorphin Pro. Again, very, very rigid. I can hardly bend that shoe. I've really got to use all my muscles. Thick stack of TPU material. Okay, almost no outsole that you can see. So this shoe is not designed for your out and out complete plodder like me. Although I did run in this shoe, my left foot did not like this shoe, but when I put in my orthotics, it was better. Yes, I have to wear orthotics. Look at the Adidas. This is the Magic Speed, I think. No, 80. So I'm getting confused with my shoes. Same thing. You can see the shape of the foot, the foot. Again, completely rigid. This shoe has actually got 2 plates. It's got a plate and it's got 5 rods. So it's slightly different to all the others. The rule does state that it's got to have 1 plate, but the plates are all in the same plane. So it's getting away. It's done that. And again, you can see that the upper is completely, that does not stretch, and I'll explain why that's important. Looking at the Hoka, this is the X2 as far, I think this is the X2. I'll just double check. Okay, and again, this is slightly more flexible. So this would be more spring-like. If you look at the shape of the shoe, it's quite a big footprint underneath. So this does give you a lot of support and stability. And in fact, the one triathlete that I spoke to, I'll chat about him just now, says that when he goes to a full Ironman, he puts Vaporflies and these into his bag for T2, because if he's had a bad bike, he's going to choose this shoe because it's more forgiving and protects him. If he's really feeling good off the bike, he's going to race the marathon, he'll put on his Vaporflies. So the on shoe, this one I've got now, this is the Cloud Flash. Okay, very, very thin stack height. The looped pods that we know that makes on shoes what they are, with the loops underneath here, very springy. If you feel this shoe, it literally springs back. So, and this is a carbon infused plate. This is not a pure carbon fiber plate. Okay, a lot of shoes have got that. In fact, even Mr. Price have brought out a shoe in the Maxed range, which has got a carbon infused plate in it. So everybody is climbing in on the bandwagon. I'm going to go past that slide. And now we get to what I call the athlete's testimonial. So what I did is I decided, it's all very good looking at the literature, and the literature is massive. It is vast. I've only really presented to you a few features that I've pulled out of about 12 articles, but this is going back 40 years worth. That's why I jokingly said to Lauren, you gave me a master's project in 6 weeks to present it, because it's a very, very large piece of body of knowledge that's available. So Anna Watkinson, Anna is one of South Africa's top triathletes. She's probably the top full distance Ironman triathlete in South Africa. And I asked, and she runs in Vaporfly, Nike only. And I said to her, why do you enjoy the shoes? And she said to me as follows: when doing triple runs on a day, so she does what she calls a Kenyan training day. She does 3 runs on a day. She says the shoes reduce the impact on my legs and I recover quicker. I've injured less compared to when I ran in a racing flat. So she does 3 runs sometimes on a day, and she prefers the shoes because she knows that she can trust that the shoe, she's not getting injured by wearing the shoe because it reduces that impact. Adrian Morris, which is the triathlete I spoke to before, Adrian is always on the podium in his age group. He's been to Kona 3 times, so he's a very good triathlete, and I know Adrian well. If anybody should be presenting science on his shoes, it's Adrian, because he really looks at the science of how his body functions. And he says they improve my form. And he's got the Vaporfly, and he's got the Nike, the Carbon X2s from Hoka, and he's just bought a couple of Adidas shoes. He says they improve his form, and he can feel, I feel that I get a controlled stiffness through my core, and that makes me run faster. So go back to that new article I told you about from Jeff Burns, where he says that in your elite middle distance runners, they are more stiff through their body, that they can load the spring more to get out of it. Adrian says that when he runs properly and he calls it the sweet spot of the shoe, his body gets a controlled stiffness that allows him to function more efficiently. He says, however, when you're tired and you start losing your form, you'll immediately feel that the shoe doesn't benefit you as much. So you have to maintain your form throughout your run. Malcolm Friedman, weekend warrior, lunchtime legend, but I'm going to give him a lot more credit than that, because together with 3 of his mates, they did a 100-kilometer run around the peninsula recently when it was near Comrades Town. They did their own race and they went 100 Ks, and he ran in Vaporflies. And I said, why? And he said, for him, there's a reduction in the jarring impact at heel strike. Now, just take that point and go back to when we were looking at the minimalist craze. Remember, we went absolutely mad about minimalist running shoes in 2013. I remember the year well. It was almost just slightly after the Rinderpest, because everybody was wearing the shoes, and they used to talk about the impact gradient. So that immediate spark of pressure as your heel hits the floor. And that's the thing you didn't want. That's why you must transition and go from a heel runner to a forefoot runner. And we know how that worked out. So basically, minimalist shoes came and went. These are going to be around for a little longer, because that impact, the jarring of heel strike, is diminished significantly when you run in these shoes, because the materials are so compliant. And what he says is, when he runs as fast as possible downhill, he can feel that he's absolutely like free to fly down the hill, because he doesn't have that jarring impact. He explained to me he went on a run, did 20 Ks in his Nikes, and then they still decided to go do another 10 on the trail. So he put in his trail shoes. He says, they felt like I put a plank on my foot, so that the shoe didn't help him. Then I chatted to a guy, David Visser. David Visser works for Mizuno, and David has actually done an incredible body of knowledge where he's been an N=1 subject by himself. He's taken a whole lot of shoes. I'm just going to move this down. Where's David's stuff? Yeah. So what he did is he did the same 5-kilometer run in a variety of shoes. And a lot of the shoes I've got are actually David's that he's lent me to show you tonight. And he looked at various parameters of what he did within it. And the thing is, he said to me, there's no question he runs faster in a carbon fiber plated shoe. He actually ran fastest in the endorphin, decreased weight, faster times. And these are comments from, he's got a little PowerPoint presentation. I lifted this straight from that PowerPoint with his permission. Flexible plate, comfortable plate, makes faster times. The height stack with a traditional heel drop, faster times and more economical. These are his opinions of what he's seen with his own body stats coming out of the runs. But he did say he has to work very hard on an uphill due to a stiff plate. And this is going to be a discussion point that's going to come up a little bit later. He says the plate was too stiff for a comfortable run uphill. So that's what some of the athletes are saying. I then say, what are the opinions from the shoe salespeople? So I went to John Arambala and Grant Bryant from Run and Craig Gornell from the Sweatshop to get opinions. And I said, what is it that when if somebody, Joe Public, comes in and says, I want a pair of carbon fiber plated shoes, what are you going to tell them? And the first question they ask is, are you going to race in them or train in them? That's their first question. They all said the same thing. They are not training shoes, but a lot of people are training in them. But remember, if you go into carbon fiber plated shoes, or your athletes go into carbon fiber plated shoes, they do need to do some training in them. So they need to do some of their speed work, 5K time trial. They do need to put the shoe on and run in the shoe to see what it feels like. There's no point training in a traditional running shoe and then putting on a carbon fiber plated shoe come race day and going for it, because things might not end up going so well for you. So you do need to advise your athletes, if they're going to go to carbon fiber plated shoes, it's another shoe that they have to do some training in. Craig Gornell from Sportsman's Warehouse, from Sweatshop, said to me, he finds that the support needs of the shoe are more difficult because you're not getting the traditional stability shoes, or I hate to use the phrase anti-pronation shoes. So where people don't have great mechanics, it finds it difficult to put them into a shoe. Okay. He says he has noticed in some of the athletes that he sells shoes to, they're coming back and noticing an increase in quad and knee pain. And that's just a comment that he made to us. When I asked Jono Rumbelow about fit, and I said, does he look at the position of the first metatarsophalangeal joint relative to the rocker? He said he does, Grant does, but a lot of shops might not, because it's not something that they're going to look at. And it's something that we might have to discuss with the running shoe shops and with the people that are supplying us to make sure that that's looked at properly, because it's something that can be influential in the shoe performing like it's designed. What about trail shoes? Well, we're seeing trail shoes with carbon plates and carbon graphene infused plates, and Innovative are about to launch a shoe with a carbon graphene infused plate. That's something like this, the On, which is a carbon infused plate. I know Salomon have just dropped apparently 6 pairs with carbon plates. So this shoe here, this is the North Face Matrix shoe. This is a carbon, it's got a carbon plate. This is a trail shoe. You can see the outer sole, it's all got mud on it. Okay, this is a trail shoe. So you are seeing them coming into trail shoes. And where we talk about these shoes into running economy and trail, on Jeep track and manicured single track, I don't see a particular problem with the shoe. It'll give you the same benefits as if you were running in a road shoe on the road. But I would caution an athlete to think twice about using a rigid plated shoe on technical trail. So for that, I just went to chat with a good friend of mine, Marius van Zyl, who's a very good trail runner in Cape Town. He's done marathons. He's run pretty much every big trail run there is. He's run marathon. Des Sable has done your Harvey 7-day race. So I think he's fairly adept at telling me what a trail shoe should or shouldn't do. And he said, if you're descending a technical trail, why would you want the shoe to throw you forward onto the ball of your foot? So remember that these shoes are designed to move your center of mass anterior to your first metatarsophalangeal joint. If you're going downhill on a technical trail, you don't want the shoe doing that to you. And I was thinking, if you've got a rigid shoe, if this were a trail shoe and the shoe is not compliant and you land there, so land there or there or there on a technical, what the trail runners call baby heads, which are little round rocks or sharp rocks, the levers that are going to go through your foot are crazy. And I think if you want to do fast technical downhill trail in a rigid carbon fiber plated shoe, it's a quick way to get a technical rescue with a helicopter. So it's not something I would advise. You still want your shoe to be compliant. Remember that you want the outer sole to comply around the obstacle so that there's grip around it. If the shoe's not complying, there's a very small surface area, you're not going to have the same grip. So in trail, always ask, what are you wanting to run in? What kind of trail are you running? If it's normal stuff, you can do it. Otherwise, don't do it. Then what is my experience? So Dennis Reebok, if he's on the call, is probably going to start laughing around about now. I took this 92 kilogram lump of mine on the same course in 5 different shoes. I ran in my old Hoka Cliftons. I have a pair of Asics Meta Rides, which is the original Asics Meta Ride, and it's also a couple of years old, so it's not as soft as it should be. I ran in the Adios, the Adidas Adios Pro, the Saucony Dolphin, and the Asics Meta Speed. And when I ran in the Hokas and the Asics Meta Ride, I had a little bit of DOMS in my quads. I'm not the fittest guy in the world. I'm a cyclist. I'm not a runner. When I was running, I realized why I ride a bicycle. Okay, it's because I can't run. So when I did those runs, I actually ended up with a bit of DOMS in my quads. When I ran in the carbon fiber plated shoes with the soft compliant midsole materials, I had no DOMS in my legs. So it was quite an interesting thing to see. Strange enough, the fastest time I put up was in my old Hokas. Who figures? Second fastest was in the Adidas. What that means, I can't tell you. I'm not a scientist. But what I can tell you is that the shoes, specifically the Adidas and the Meta Edge, you can feel that plate working underneath your foot. You can feel how that shoe works. You really can feel that movement underneath your foot. Exactly what it does. Maybe it'll even convince me to try a little bit more running. what have I not seen? So what I've not seen, I've not seen literature on injury rates in carbon fiber plated shoes, apart from one comment that came out of my, I've just got a WhatsApp. Okay. Ortega commented on a group by Firminger, which looked at Achilles tendinopathy risk. So there's very little. There was one runner in the 2020 London Marathon who was wearing carbon fiber plated shoes, had to pull out because he got injured. That could have happened anywhere. Okay. I've not seen literature on the specifics of foot mechanics, foot biomechanics in the wearers within the tested cohorts. So when you read the literature, it's all, everywhere from 5 to 25 recreational runners or elite runners or good runners were recruited. They're just runners. So they consider all feet are equal. As a podiatrist, I can tell you that that is not the truth. I've been a podiatrist for a couple of years. Not all feet are not equal. So where that literature showed anomalies within what they're seeing, where somebody might not have had the same running economy as the rest of them, it would be interesting to go and look at those people's feet and say, what happened? Why did that person not do it? It could come down to the fact that that foot just not going to function any better in anything. So the literature on the specifics of foot mechanics, I haven't seen anything that does that. The literature on the effects of increased stride length and its effect on the calf muscle pump. Now, this is something that happened at around 2 o'clock in the morning. My mind went offside. And I thought of, is there a possible reason why carbon fiber plated shoes can improve running economy that no one's looked at? So again, we go to my hypothetical cloned athlete, which is you've got two athletes who are identical. Okay, and I've just recently lectured on the calf muscle pump, and I had the good fortune to read some excellent work by my colleague Annette Thompson on the foot muscle, on the foot pump. I always thought that the calf muscle was where the blood got moved up, but it actually starts in the foot. It's a phenomenal piece of work that Annette has done and changed my outlook on things. But it's well established that blood flow back to the heart requires a harmonious synchronization of heartbeat and human gait. We know this. There's a refill stage and a discharge phase in the calf muscle pump. Okay, and I'm going to ask a question. Now, this is purely me speculating and asking. This is not research. This is my mind that ran rampant at 2 in the morning. Okay, we know that the calf pump can discharge around 60 milliliters of blood per step. So if you've increased somebody's cadence by 5 centimeters, their float phase will be a little bit longer. How much is a little bit? We're talking a couple of microseconds probably. But giving them a couple more microseconds in float phase, the calf muscle is going to be a little bit more, more flaccid. It will potentially allow the calf, the blood to, the refill phase to be slightly bigger, so that when they land and toe off and they discharge, I'll discharge a little bit more blood. So again, if we just say that change that I'm thinking about, there's 1 milliliter more blood in the calf per step, and you've got a cadence of 195, you're moving 195 more milliliters of blood around the body just by running in the shoe, because you've increased their float phase. So it's going to be very interesting to see if research like this does come out in the near future. But to me, it makes sense that it's the sum of all parts. It's not just the shoe that's doing it. There's a lot more that's going into this that we're perhaps missing. As a discussion, I'm going to start off in saying that we have been plowing the field of pronation and supination for years. We've focused on frontal plane mechanics, and perhaps we've been missing something. And the reality is that sagittal plane mechanics, which is movement in that direction, okay, frontal plane being pronation and supination, sagittal plane mechanics makes up about 75% of the movement of the foot. And these shoes, by virtue of their shape and design, addresses sagittal plane movement exceptionally well. And the records are speaking for themselves, where athletes in their droves are benefiting from the changed physics in these shoes. They improve foot function, which overall improves body function, which is in turn improving the running economy. And that's something that we need to look at, is what is actually changing this? And we need to be holistic and look at all sides of human gait in the shoes and work out what is it doing. So there's a lot of work, but I think there's still a lot more work that can be done and can come into this. And gait is a harmonious synchronization of movement and physiology. It's not just movement. The physiology has to support the movement. And gait uses all our systems and senses at the same time. And if we alter one parameter, it will affect another parameter. And to explain this, I use an analogy. I always tell my patients, if you've got a train and one wheel on the train doesn't move, the whole train is affected. Similarly, if you make all the wheels move better, the whole train's going to move better. So the improvement in foot function coming from the shoe has definitely improved running economy. It's going to be interesting, and I go back to a comment that David Visser said, have to work hard on uphill due to very stiff plate too stiff for comfortable running uphill. We haven't yet seen what's going to happen in a Comrades or a Two Oceans marathon or any hilly marathon. All of the marathons around, the big marathons around the world, are relatively flat courses. We haven't seen how these shoes are tested on a very long, like a long, get to the top of poly shorts running in the shoe. I want to see what's going to happen, because it hasn't been tested in that environment. So as a discussion point, let's see if there's questions about what people think is going to happen. What's also coming out of the shoe, orthotic considerations. Really three things: design, materials, and treatment. So by design, I'm going to tell you that I put my orthotics into these. I put my orthotics into this shoe, into the Adidas. I could not walk. The construction of the orthotic made my foot completely unstable. There's no ways I could even walk with that shoe. So where people are coming in wearing more and more orthotic carbon fiber plated shoes, those of us in the podiatric and the orthotic community are going to have to step outside of our box and look at how to redesign orthotics that work better with this genre of shoes. So podiatrists are really going to have to put in our thinking caps and saying, what do we do differently that's going to give the same benefit? And again, can we tweak an athlete just with an orthotic? Absolutely. There's small things that we can do that can make an even bigger difference. And remember, I said we haven't looked at I couldn't see any literature that looks on foot function inside of these shoes. It's all feet are considered equal. In terms of materials, the materials that we currently use to make our orthotics, polypropylene and EVAs, are quite hard, rigid materials. Do you want to increase the rigidity of a shoe with a rigid orthotic? So we might have to be looking to get hold of different densities of P-backs that will complement the shape of the shoe and look more at the interior geometry of the shoe. When I say the interior, I'm talking about the geometry inside the shoe, the flat inside part. How can we alter that instead of putting in a true orthotic, small wedges, little arch pads, things like that, to change that and go from there. And then very importantly, they're treatment shoes. We can, and I already do, introduce a lot of the rocker bottom sole shoes for certain conditions, and it makes a significant difference. So by using the rocker bottom sole, you're enhancing sagittal plane mechanics, and that's an important part of, very big important part of foot function. We can use them as treatment shoes, and again, think turf toe, sesamoiditis, first metatarsal phalangeal joint arthritis. So where you want to reduce the workload at the first MTPJ, these shoes are doing it already. They're designed that way. That's their function. To conclude, I'm going to say that the world is going nuts over these shoes. Really, the world is going completely bonkers. And it's taken 40 years of R&D to get where we are. Like I said, this work didn't start a couple years ago. This has been going on about 40 years. Adidas were already in the late 80s looking at increasing rigidity of shoes. So this has been going on. It's just, like I said, Nike were first to market, and Nike have got this phenomenal marketing machine. Everyone thinks their shoe's the best, and it is great. The records are there. I'm not saying it's a bad shoe. It's a phenomenal shoe. But there's a lot of other shoes that are coming onto the market that are really, really good. Okay. So the midsole materials, we know that they decrease vibration, which in turn reduces the onset of fatigue. The plate maintains the integrity and shape of the midsole, which is important. The Meta Rocker forefoot shape changes the angle of toe off. And I just wanted to discuss that with you quickly before I carry on. So if you can imagine a foot toeing off doesn't the surface, the foot has to toe off a flat surface. What happens is, as the shoe gets into that position, what's happened is the surface that the foot is toeing off has changed. So the foot's now toeing off of a slight decline, slight downhill, and that changes the vector of your forward movement. And doesn't have to change it a lot. It's got to change it a little bit. When we look at people running, we talk about their vertical oscillation. So as they toe off, how high do they go in their gait? And you look at them, we often see what I call the bunny, where they bounce like a bunny. So you've got a vertical oscillation in gait. Putting these shoes on might change that vertical oscillation from a vertical moment to a slightly more longitudinal moment. So it's increasing it. So the change of the meta rocker changes the angle of the foot in toeing off. There's a reduction in the amount of positive work. What I mean by positive work, that's concentric work done, the first metatarsophalangeal joint in the knee. There's also a decrease in the negative work, which is the eccentric work that's done in and around the foot and the calf in running. And there's a decrease in the propulsive force needed at toe off. One of the articles, I think it was Ortega, my mind's just not quite there at the moment, where they showed that the amount of force required at toe off actually decreased in a stiffer sole shoe. So you're decreasing the amount of work, which definitely will have an impact on running economy compared to other shoes. Okay, what I've put up there is that's a very good thread in podiatry arena on carbon fiber plated shoes. That was shared to me by Craig Payne. And the last thing we're going to say, let's see what the Tokyo Olympic Marathon brings. And here's my prediction. As long as there's no crazy freak weather events, if they're good conditions, we may just see those two guys chug it out and go, might see for the first time, a sub-2 marathon. Let's see what happens. When it comes time, I think it's in August, the Olympic marathon, you're going to find me seated in my chair watching that marathon from start to finish, because I think we're going to see history being made properly. Not a manufactured sub-2, we're going to see a real sub-2. And that, I think, takes me to the end of my talk. And I think I would imagine there are going to be some questions.
Yes, I've got some. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean. Sure.
Okay, glad you enjoyed it.
It gets, absolutely, it really gets the mind running with a good amount of questions and a different tangent to think of things and how we're looking at shoes.
Oh, this is really, that's changed. Like I said, the barefoot running thing just made everyone get angry. This is making everyone excited, because this is really a change. This is a huge change that's come about, where these shoes are really, really, really altering the way people are functioning. And it's, dare I use the phrase, legal doping. Because I said, if guys were changing this, you know, getting results like this all the time, they would be testing them on a weekly basis to see what they're taking, you know, but they just put on different shoes and they're going, the same athletes going faster. And that's because there's an improvement in the running economy that comes from the shoe.
Cool. So we've got a couple of questions.
I'm sure.
You've touched on a couple of these questions already, but I'm going to go through them anyway. There's one here from Annabelle. By changing the plate of the shoe you use completely, but keeping the same mileage as your old shoe or plate, would you say an athlete is more at risk of injury to their feet, like a stress fracture?
I remember I said that when they're not really they're not training shoes. If you look at it like something like the Saucony Endorphin, there's the Pro and the Speed. And the Speed is a shoe with a slightly less compliant plate. It's got a TPU infused plate. So it's a bit more, it's a more flexible version of this. To run in a rigid shoe, there is a possibility that you can cause injury. So as with any change in footwear, you know, if you've gone from shoe X to shoe B to shoe Y, any shoe, you must always transition slowly into the shoe. Running in carbon fiber plated shoes is going to change things. The important thing that I didn't mention, I'm going to mention now, and this goes to the physios and the bios and the podiatrists out there, is it is so important to make sure people are doing their gym work, because your body's functioning differently. You need to be able to, if you've got an increase of 5 centimeters on your stride length, you've got to be able to handle that on landing. If you can't handle that on landing, you are going to get injured. So you have to make sure that athletes transition into this slowly. if there are injuries, if there are injuries, and it goes to the team. You can't manage these patients on your own, whatever discipline you are. I've always said this. Sports medicine is a team event. So you need the podiatrist, you need the physio, you need the bio, you need the chiro, you need the sports physician if necessary, the orthopod if necessary. You've got to look at these athletes and really manage them carefully and well. This is not, you know what, go out and buy yourself a pair of Vaporflies, you're going to run your PB in parkrun. You know, so you really got to, and then, you know, he might put the Vaporfly on and hate the shoe. Now you've made him spend $5.5 grand on a pair of shoes.
Exactly.
So you really, and when I say the team event, the shoe store, the guys in the shoe stores, you know, they're vital to this component. You can't do it without. It's a whole team event. Everyone's got to be on the same page, looking at what is the person's injury, or what is their purpose for changing into a carbon fiber plated shoe, and how can you best do this whilst reducing the risk of injury.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the podiatrist role comes in critically.
Yeah.
Sean, let's just stop your screen sharing so that people can see us better
Okay.
to answer the questions.
Okay. Stop share. Okay, that's better.
Cool. I think we've kind of answered Paul's question. If someone needs an anti-pronation shoe, should they wear an inner sole with a shoe like a Vaporfly, or are there stability shoes with the same components?
No, there's no stability shoes. All of these shoes are very soft and compliant. So you're not going to be looking at, I'm just going to use a stability shoe that comes into mind, Asics Gel Kayana. You're not going to get that kind of shoe, which is a rigid, hard material designed to resist a moment in the frontal plane, in a soft compliant shoe. It's just not possible. But if somebody wanted to run, they could train in the one shoe, do a little bit of their work in the carbon fiber plated shoe, and then race in the carbon fiber plated shoe. But that shoe would then need to have something put into it. That is where that's the podiatrist's job. And that's why I said we need to start thinking outside of our box of how we've done things for the last X number of years, because the materials that we currently use might not function well with a carbon fiber plated shoe. So we might have to use, I'm just going to use things more like Poron as opposed to EVA to try and do that, because, and also somebody's running, they're running a marathon, they're out of the shoe. So it depends on what the problem is. But if somebody's a really bad overpronator, you need to have a look. And remember, the pronation is a thing that's often a result of other things. And this is a whole nother lecture. So a whole nother talk. We haven't got enough time tonight. People still want supper. But you have to look and see what are the reasons for pronation and address those. Okay. And you might have to do it slightly differently to the way we've done it in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we've kind of, Calvin's asking, what type of mileage are we expecting to get out of these shoes? And I think that's partially been answered by, this is more of a racer.
Okay, I'm going to answer that question. Malcolm Friedman did 800 kilometers in a pair of Vaporflies as a training shoe. He says that they were falling apart, but they still worked. He says the integrity of the plate was still perfect. The midsole was getting hammered. So, where we say they're racers, they're not trainers, I don't know. We're going to start seeing things. People are going to start training in these.
I think this is a whole new spectrum where we're going to be seeing a totally new dynamic.
Yeah.
Of
again, this
injury versus training versus racing versus, I think it's a whole new dynamic.
This is 3 years. These shoes have been around 3 or 4 years. I've been a podiatrist for 30. So 10% of my career, the last 10% is when we're seeing this change. Yeah. I've been running on the same operating system for the 27 before. Now suddenly we've got to start thinking differently. How are we going to manage these people? And some people can train in the shoes. They'll be absolutely fine. Others cannot. So people might start needing 2 to 3 different pairs of shoes. Okay. So, which is fantastic for the running guys. The running shoe shops are saying, bring it on. Sell a guy 2 shoes at a time, one of which is a racer for 4 to 5 grand. Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is also where your podiatrist comes in to help manage that and advise best as possible where that patient should be going, not in which direction they should be going in terms of their shoes. If you have pins in the knee or had a knee replacement, what do you think the effect of carbon plates in the shoe would be on that hardware?
Okay. When you say pins, there's pins and pins. You know, if it's a replacement, somebody's had a full knee replacement or a part or a hemi. I think that, again, going back to the orthopedic surgeon and working in a group and saying, what does that person's gait look like? Some gait re-education, going to the physio and or the bio and look at some gait re-education to stop the vertical oscillation. I think that carbon fiber plated shoes could benefit people with knee pathology quite significantly when managed in the right environment by the right group.
Agreed, yeah. I think particularly that rocker on the knee, I've seen some phenomenal results just with the straight Hoka rocker in my practice with patients, particularly with PFS, any kind of PFS really. I have PFS myself. I run in a Hoka, and the quality of run is significantly different to a standard running shoe.
And also gait re-education is important, and obviously quad strength. If somebody's going to run downhill,
is critical.
Moving their center of mass forward, and they don't have quad strength, eccentric quad strength, they're going to be in trouble.
Agreed. Is there a heel to toe consideration when considering carbon plated shoes, higher or lower?
Okay, so most of the shoes are between 4 and 8 millimeters.
Yeah.
And the fact is the shoes are so compliant, the materials are so compliant that I don't think the heel drop's going to make that much of a difference. It'll come out in the wash as we look at people running in the shoes. But the majority of them are around 4 to 8. And 4 to 8, 4 millimeters here or there, the body will actually be able to adapt and cope with. And the materials are so soft that they'll cope as well. So between the body coping a little bit and the material of the shoe coping, I think that the heel drop is not necessarily going to make that much of a difference. Remember that the whole point is at heel strike, this collapses. You go, remember that you're running forward. This collapses, you quickly go onto the forefoot and you load the plate and toe it off. Okay. So you're moving forward. So I don't think that the heel drop is going to make that much of a difference. It can make a difference, but it might not make as much as we thought in traditional running shoes.
Okay, cool. Is there an increased risk of injury for a heel striker using a trainer with a pointy heel like the Vaporfly?
It depends where you heel strike. So if you've got somebody who's got an extremely if we go to that picture, if I go back, there's the picture of Eliud Kipchoge running. Eliud Kipchoge, I've watched quite a lot of video of him running. Although it looks like he's a heel striker, he's actually a mid-foot striker. He almost lands on the middle of his foot. His foot slightly dorsiflexed, he lands on the middle of his foot. So if you're a complete lateral heel striker, so somebody with a very lateral heel striker and it's lateral, then there's a chance you're going to hurt yourself, because the vector of where you're landing and the lever movement, the lever from the point of impact going into your ankle might be, the shoes are quite narrow. So then if that's the case, I would say to that somebody, don't go to the Nike, go to the Hoka, because the Hoka's got a much wider heel. So
exactly,
you're looking at that width there versus a shoe that's probably that wide. So if you're landing here versus landing there, this is going to be much more forgiving and protect the heel at heel strike.
I've actually had a patient who was in the new Pegasus with that back fin, with a very lateral heel strike, where we were landing up with all sorts of issues, particularly Achilles. And as soon as we changed it,
and you'll find Achilles, peroneal are going to get hammered.
Yeah.
Because peroneal are going to fire to stabilize the hind foot quite quickly.
Exactly. Do you see a line in the horizon with this technology? How far is too far before the shoe outshines the athlete? Okay, so Adidas dropped a shoe yesterday. It's not race legal. It's got a 50 millimeter stack. It's 5 centimeters of sponge, of rubber ball. The guy who ran in it said he thinks he needs a parachute when it comes down. So are we going to see things? We're going to start seeing better materials that are spongier and springier,
plate designs are going to improve, I think we're going to see guys going faster and faster in the shoes. There obviously will be a point that you can't go any faster. And one would hope that the IAAF rules would eventually say, you know what, guys, this has now gone too far. You know, let's stop, you know, stop pulling the hell out of the game here. There's a point at which you've got to look at it, athletes are doing something and the shoes doing so much more. But having said that, I use the analogy of a particular race that happens in France on bicycles, where one or two of the athletes supposedly doped and he won 7 times in a row. I don't know if everyone's following me here, but if all the cyclists are doping, he was still the best of the doped cyclists. So if all the athletes are wearing these shoes and one guy's faster, he's still the fastest in the fast shoes. So the whole bar is being raised, you know. I mean, next is going to be like wings and jetpacks. I don't know what they're going to be.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
People are going to need a pilot's license.
Yeah.
There's a few questions on injuries, but I think we've kind of established that we don't know.
But it needs to be managed.
You
need to manage the athlete's expectation right from the very start. And if a guy comes in injured and says, I went from running an X shoe into a carbon fiber plated shoe and I got injured, there's going to be reasons why it's happened. So you need to understand those reasons. And that's where the team comes in. You know, did you have the strength to control what's going on at your foot? You remember that there's no such thing as energy loss in a system. If there's potential energy and kinetic energy, they're always going to be the same. So if you're putting energy into a system, it's got to go somewhere. It might not come out in the foot. It might come out in another part of the body. So if the shoe's returning energy, but you can't handle what the shoe's returning, you're potentially going to get injured. So we then have to say, look at the injuries and go on a case-by-case basis. There's no blanket that's going to cover everything. Look on a case-by-case basis and work within the group that you've got, the podiatrist, physio, bio, chiro, sports physician, orthopod, etc., and work out what did this shoe do that's wrong. One of the things I think that's going to be a big factor is, like I said, the curve of the forefoot relative to the first MPJ. That's one of the first places I'm going to be looking at as well.
I think one of the other things that will be interesting, and I've actually seen this with the Pure Boost technology that Adidas introduced a couple of years ago. I actually have very few patients in them because I find that my patients who come to me with injuries who've been running in the Adidas have no eccentric fitness. So they can't handle the eccentric energy return that Pure Boost pellet gives. Yeah. And I'd be very interested to actually see, now that we have a carbon plate, what we are going to see going forward in terms of our weekend warriors versus our strong athletes. And that's quite an important comparison to make, because a lot of our weekend warriors are doing no strengthening. You'll often see in their gait that they've got weak musculature all over the place, which needs to be strengthened and driven home. A lot of my runners, first thing I say, half your time should be spent in the gym strengthening if you want to run the marathon injury free. Otherwise, you're going to land up with issues.
You'd rather be at the start line strong and partially unfit than fit and weak.
Exactly. There was I think this kind of answers Desmond's question of are these for runners of all ages or just young runners? I think they're for strong runners.
Okay, so I'm involved in the triathlon world a little bit. There's a guy who competes in the 70 to 75 age group at half Ironman, and he's still doing a close on 6-hour triathlon, half Ironman triathlon. He's 70. You put him in his shoes, I promise he's going to go below 6 hours. You know, so there's an athletes strong. Guys, no, athletes today are, there's no such thing as a you have to be young or old. It would be fit and strong or not strong. Age is just a number. I mean, look at me.
Dr. Brian Brown did ask a question about an EVA cam orthotic into a shoe with a plate. Does this effectively convert a non-shanked shoe, which may not optimally support a shank-dependent orthoses, into a shoe with a functional shank, the plate, which therefore will potentially make the orthoses more effective than it would have been in a non-plate shoe?
I'm going to answer quickly and say yes, it possibly will. So because all running shoes are not shanked at all. but you're now putting in a rigid plate. You're putting, I'm going to pull this one out again. Where's it? Where's my plate? I had my plate here. Yeah, you're putting this. You know, the orthotist will have a look and say, yeah, but we put those inside people's shoes all the time. And that's creating a shank. So you now put an orthotic on top of this. You're creating a shanked sprung orthotic. But the density of the EVA that you're milling might need to change. It might not have to be too hard. If it's too hard, you've now got rigidity plus rigidity. Or you can't put a plastic orthotic onto this, a polyprop orthotic onto this, because that's going to change, potentially change the functioning of both. So you might be way over controlling the foot. So as I say, we're going to have to sit and have a good think outside of the box and say, how do we redo our orthotics?
Masterclass, Sean.
Give me some time. Compared to what you did to me before, give me 4 weeks. I'm there. I'm up.
Cool. I think we're done on our questions. A lot of them have been answered.
Both Sean and Lauren, thank you so much for the way you presented and the way that you handled that. Sean, we can definitely see the passion coming through.
Yeah.
And if you take a look through the chat, you'll see just heaps and heaps of praise. So really, thank you so much for the amount of effort that you put in and your knowledge, which is shining through. Like you said, yeah, it's a master's project at least, coming to terms with all of this.
There's a couple of topics there.
Yeah. If I add in my blood flow component, then it's straight to PhD level. and I'm not signing up for a PhD just yet.
Great. Lauren, thank you very much for handling the Q&A. Lots of questions came in, so it was very interesting to see all of that. I'd like to just advertise our next talk, and I'm just going to pop this up on your screen. You should be able to see the upcoming webinars that WiSH has a role in. It's Josie next week is having a talk about the foot and ankle in collaboration with the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics and WiSH. And in particular, they will be talking about how to manage osteochondral lesions of the talus. So that's in a week's time. Please note that it starts at 6:30 and not at 6 like our webinars. And then again, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, our friends at SASMA for advertising our talks, and everyone that was able to join this evening. So thank you to Asina Lito. Take a look at their DS range and be sure to check out their social media, their Instagram and their Facebook profiles for more information. Everyone, thank you very much and have a good evening.